Hello, people. Welcome back. And today we're going to learn about young Alexander, which will grow up to be, who will grow up to be Alexander the Great. Okay? Say hello, Zena.
Hello.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so this is a map of classical Greece, not the Greece of today, but the Greece of a while back. Okay, so we have Ithaca, Olympia, Mycenae, Sparta, Athens, Aegean Sea, Persia. Right, this is where King Darius lived. Troy, wow, Troy was right within the Persian Empire. Very interesting. Crete. All right, so let's look. We learned about a war in which the Greek city-states fought together against the mighty Persian Empire. Who won that war, the Greeks or the Persians?
Greeks.
Okay, very good. After the Persian wars were over, Pericles helped turn Athens into one of the greatest cities in the world. What are some things that visitors to Athens would have seen and heard during the golden age of Athens?
They will heard about more ideas.
Good.
And they will see very beautiful buildings.
Very good. Beautiful buildings and statues. Now, do you remember the three philosophers of that time? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. And why was Socrates so great? What did he do when you asked him a question?
He used a question to answer back.
Right. And what did Aristotle do? What did he always do? He was always
thinking about questions.
Like why, right?
Why people can't breathe underwater?
Right.
They don't have gills.
Discussion of new ideas, democracy, beautiful buildings, the Parthenon and other temples, wonderful plays, beautiful statues, and pottery. Pottery is like the clay. When you using clay to make a bowl, it's pottery. So let's find Greece on a map. Put your finger on it. Then move your finger north. North of Greece was a country named Macedonia. Okay, so where's Macedonia? Can you point the mouse towards there?
On top of
Okay, so this is another country. So you have three warring countries. You got Macedonia, you have Persia, and then you have Greece, right? Which is this part of stuff here. Alexander was a very interesting person. So, Macedonia lay north of Greece. The Macedonians spoke the same language and believed in the same gods as the Greeks. But there was one big difference between Greece and Macedonia. The Greek city-states had many rulers. Macedonians had just one king. And the king of Little Macedonia had big plans. He wanted to rule Greece. So the king ordered his spearmen into the straight lines and his horsemen into columns, and they rolled over Greece like a thunderstorm. The Macedonians crushed city-state after city-state until at last they conquered even glorious Athens. The king of Macedonia was now the king of Greece too. Triumphant, he stood on the marble steps of the Parthenon, and looked proudly out at his new kingdom. Wow, so he conquered Greece, this guy from Macedonia.
Too strong.
Okay, can you read this?
In those days, kings were seldom satisfied. I want more land. This king thought, I must have Persia too.
Good. Persia was a big place, and the king knew he couldn't rule it alone. My son Alexander will have to help me. After all, his name means ruler of men. Alexander did become a famous ruler of men. He became known as Alexander the Great. Let's learn how he grew from a boy into a king. Okay, so now we're going to have a reading room. Oh, yeah, this mic. Sorry about the mic sounds, guys. Huh?
Visit the reading room.
Yeah, so here what we're going to do is... Yeah, so we can do it, I think, because let's see if it works. So, reading room. I'm going to do reading room with audio. His story is very interesting.
The Young Man with Big Dreams. Young Alexander was good at sports and quick in his studies. He loved music and poetry, especially Homer's story of the Trojan War, the Iliad. And no wonder, for Alexander's mother told him he was descended from the warrior hero of the Iliad, Achilles. His father said, "That's nothing. My side of the family is descended from Hercules." Alexander dreamed of being as strong and brave as these Greek heroes, and he carried a copy of the Iliad wherever he went. Like Achilles and Hercules, nothing could scare Alexander. When he was a small boy, he went with his father, the king, to look at a war horse that the king wanted to buy. The splendid coal-black stallion named Bucephalus was wilder than the wind. No man could ride it, for it reared up, spun in circles, and struck the air with its hooves. Alexander watched Bucephalus carefully. He noticed that the horse kicked and reared only when it saw its shadow. "This horse isn't afraid of us," Alexander realized. "It's frightened by its own shadow." The king said, "The stallion is too fierce. I'd never be able to manage him." "I could," said Alexander. "Nonsense," replied the king. Alexander walked fearlessly up to the animal, grabbed its bridle, and turned it away from its shadow. Instantly, Bucephalus stood still. Alexander patted the horse, and with one nimble leap sprang onto its back. Bucephalus exploded into a wild gallop. Everyone thought Alexander would be thrown and killed, but the boy held on and let the horse run until it was tired. Then he pulled lightly on the reins and rode over to the king. The stallion was covered with flecks of foam, and Alexander's face was flushed with excitement. The king looked at his young son. "Alexander, Macedon is too small for you. Anyone who can ride such a horse will need a greater kingdom." The king bought Bucephalus for Alexander, and the boy and his horse were best friends. Wherever one went, the other was sure to be near. Never would the noble horse allow anyone else to ride him. But Alexander's father knew that if his son was to rule a greater kingdom, he needed more than a bold horse. So he sent Alexander to learn from the great Greek philosopher Aristotle. You remember that Aristotle, along with Socrates and Plato, was one of the greatest philosophers in ancient Greece. What is a philosopher? A thinker who loves learning and wisdom. Aristotle taught Alexander about Greek history and ideas. He even wrote a paper for his student explaining how to be a good ruler. It may have been Aristotle who sparked the boy's curiosity about faraway lands and people. Alexander didn't study long with Aristotle. When the boy was 16, his father went away to battle and left him in charge of the kingdom. By the time Alexander was 18, he was already a commander in the Macedonian army. This was good experience, because when he turned 20, his father died. Suddenly, Alexander was more than a young commander. Now he was king of Macedon and Greece. His father had conquered Greece, but Alexander had an even larger goal. He wanted to rule the whole world. Was it possible for one man and one army to conquer so many miles and millions of people? According to one story, it was. Alexander once stopped at a city where he saw an ox cart tied to a pole with a knot. He noticed that the knot was larger than a man's head. "Tell me about the knot," he said to the townspeople. One of them replied, "This is the Gordian knot. Legend says that the man who can undo it will have the world for his kingdom." Another man said, "Don't even try to untie it. Hundreds of men before you have made the attempt. No one has even found the ends of the rope." Alexander carefully studied the knot. It was true that the ends of the rope were hidden deep inside, and untying it would be impossible. So he drew his sword, and with one swift motion, he sliced the knot in half. The townspeople were stunned. No one had ever thought to undo the knot that way. They knew this young man was someone who would not let anything stand in his way. Alexander's eyes gleamed with victory. He looked at the people and the twisted pieces of Gordian knot scattered at his feet. "The world is my kingdom," he declared.
Okay. Interesting. Let's see. Which country conquered the Greek city-states?
That word is a kind of long.
Macedonia.
Macedonia.
Macedon.
Macedon.
Who was Bucephalus?
A horse.
And
And he was Alexander's best friend.
What was the horse afraid of?
His own shadow.
Right. It is said that Alexander once visited a city where he saw a large knot of rope called the Gordian knot. What did the people who lived there tell Alexander about the Gordian knot?
They said, if you can untie the Gordian knot, the whole world will be yours.
Right.
And another one said, don't even try. No people can't, not one people can even found the end of the rope.
So if you saw that knot and someone told you to don't try to untie it, would you listen to them?
I would try to use a sword and cut it if I have one.
So you would have did the same thing as Alexander the Great? Yeah. Okay.
Well,
when Alexander undid the knot, what did it show about him? What does that tell us about Alexander when he cut the knot? What does that tell about him? That's kind of a hard question. It showed that he had his mind made up to rule the world, and he would not let anything stand in his way. He's like a tank, right?
And squeeze everything down?
Crush everything in front of him.
That's crazy.
Okay, so state that Bucephalus was Alexander's horse. Tell major events of the story of the Gordian knot. Tell that the king of Macedonia conquered the Greek city-states. Okay, the same, right? Ask your students to tell you in 2 to 4 sentences about the story of Alexander. Who was Alexander's horse? This is the activity sheet. Excuse me. So color the picture of a famous statue of Alexander the Great and his horse, Bucephalus. Then write the horse's name under the picture. Then read the sentence about his horse. Cross out the ones that are not true. Okay, so if it's not true, you cross it out, right?
However, it's true.
You leave it. So Bucephalus was afraid of his own shadow.
True.
Okay, you read it, and then you tell me if it's true or not.
Bucephalus is afraid of his own shadow. That's true. Alexander's father could ride because that's false.
Bucephalus.
Bucephalus, that's false.
Good.
Because he only let Alexander ride him.
Okay.
Bucephalus was
Read it. Bucephalus
was a coal black horse. He is a black horse.
Good.
It was easy for Alexander to ride Bucephalus. That's also true.
Bucephalus.
Bucephalus and Alexander stayed together for many years. That's true.
Okay, good.
Only one is a false.
It was easy for Alexander to ride Bucephalus. I don't know if that was true. It was a little difficult. Well, because the horse kept jumping around and everything. This depends on
when.
It depends on, it's like an opinion, not a fact. Some people could say it's easy, some people would say it's hard. Okay. Excuse me. Can you read this?
Think back to the story.
You read
about the young man with the big dream.
Recall
how Alexander got his horse. Then color the picture of the famous statue of Alexander the Great and his horse.
Bucephalus. Let me teach you how to read that. Bu, and then C-E-P-H is Ceph. Buceph, right? And then A. Bucephalus. Okay, say it again. Bucephalus. Okay. Right?
Write the horse's name on the line under the picture.
Good.
Next, read the sentence about Alexander and his horse. Cross out the ones that are not true.
Okay, let's see the answer. Alexander's father could could ride Bucephalus. False. It was easy for Alexander to ride Bucephalus. See, so that one was false. It was not easy for him to ride. All right. I think this might be the end. I'm not sure. Okay. The story of the Gordian Knot activity sheet. So you're gonna do 2, Zena. Tell the story of the Gordian Knot. Cut out the sentences. You know how that was, how we did it before. So you're gonna do that one. You can do that now if you like. Okay, so Alexander becomes a king. Alexander cuts the Gordian knot. Alexander goes to the city. Alexander hopes to rule the world.
This one is he hopes to rule the world. Because that's his picture, I think so.
Okay.
I know like that. That's the knot.
Which one's the knot?
The one you're pointing.
What's this one?
That's when he was younger, he tried to ride a horse.
Really? He doesn't look so young. But this says nothing about him. I think this one is
where he become a king.
Right, because he has a crown. And then Alexander cuts the Gordian knot. Here.
Yes.
Alexander goes to the city.
Oh, he goes to this city.
Maybe it's this one, right? Alexander hopes to rule the world. Maybe this one. So this one is first. Alexander hopes to rule the world. Alexander goes to the city, right?
Yes.
Alexander cuts the Gordian knot. Alexander becomes king, right? Because you see he has a crown on his head. Okay, beyond the lesson. And I think this is the end. Of course, they're going to have some questions. Okay, there's 5 questions. Close your eyes. Try to know.
I know what the question is.
You ready?
Yes.
I think these will be easy. Okay. Who conquered the Greek city-states? How to say that name? Macedonia. So I'm going to have to say no because you forgot this word. So Macedonia. Okay.
Daddy, I'm maybe gonna get less than 80 points.
Did the students... Oh, sorry. Who was Bucephalus?
He's a black horse.
And what else?
And he's friend with Alexander.
Okay. He's Alexander's horse. You can say that. It is said that Alexander once visited a city where he saw a large knot of rope called the Gordian knot. What did the people who lived there tell Alexander about the Gordian knot?
The one who cut the knot, untie it, will get the chance to rule the whole world. And the other one said, don't even try.
Good.
No one can even find the end of the knot.
Okay. How did Alexander undo the Gordian knot?
He cut the knot into half.
Good. When Alexander undid the Gordian knot, what did it show about him?
He don't let nothing block his way.
Good. You don't let anything to stop him, right? Very good. So you have, I think, 80%, which is a good grade. It's a good grade. You just have to remember Macedonia. Okay? And learn more about the history of Alexander the Great, his horse Bucephalus, and the story of the Gordian knot. Here are some questions to explore. See if you can think of more. Why did Alexander name his horse Bucephalus? How old was Alexander when he got Bucephalus? How did the Gordian knot get tied in the first place? Who else tried to untie it? Search the internet or go to the library to look for these answers and more. Okay, so this is the end of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for tomorrow's lesson. And goodbye. Say goodbye, Zena. Okay, so very